Welcome everyone to our webinar today entitled What is your Air Quality Index IQ? What to know, what to do to improve air quality and your health. I'm excited to present to you today this webinar that was developed in conjunction with our partners at the Hoosier Environmental Council and the Indiana University Environmental Resilience Institute. We have several topics to cover today, including air quality in Indiana and why it matters, what we've learned recently in the science about air quality and how we contribute to it, and how we can improve the air. Our topics will include both indoor and outdoor air quality. Our speakers today include Heidi Beidinger from University of Notre Dame, Brandon Boer from Purdue, Gabe Filippelli from Indiana University, Nusrat Young from Purdue University, Jocelyn Kiernan from the Hoosier Environmental Council, Janet McCabe from the IU McKinney School of Law and ERI, as well as Phil Stevens, also from Indiana University. I'd like to first turn it over to our first two speakers who will speak broadly about outdoor and indoor air quality, Dr. Janet McCabe and Dr. Gabe Filippelli. Thank you.
It's great to see so many people here. Gabe and I are really pleased to be participating in this program because we understand how important the air we breathe is, whether we're indoors or outdoors. And whether you're new to this topic or have some experience with it, or even are connected to it through your job, we hope you come away today with some new information, because there's research happening all the time, including here in Indiana, and new information that we think it's important for people to have. Just quickly, I want to make clear that Gabe and I are speaking on behalf of ourselves here, and not on behalf of Indiana University. So that everything we're saying is our own views today. Before we turn it over to the other panelists who will cover in detail some of the recent research and practical issues of how to protect yourself and your family from indoor air contaminants, we're going to provide a general overview of what we mean by indoor air quality, how it relates to outdoor air quality, what are the main types of chemicals we can be exposed to inside and their sources, how they can affect our health, and what types of programs and policies exist that address indoor air quality. And one message that we hope you come away with during this program is that when it comes to both outdoor and indoor air, there are pollutants that we can be exposed to, that we are exposed to, that are not good for our health. And children, older people, and people with certain health conditions like heart disease or asthma are particularly vulnerable. And that there are things that we can do to protect ourselves and reduce risk, especially with the air that we breathe indoors. There are also things that we can't do to protect ourselves from those risks. So you'll hear about all of that today. So with that introduction, I'm going to turn it over to my colleague, Gabe, and I will try to keep the slides running for him.
Thanks so much, Jan. Can I have the next slide, please?
Maybe.
The reason why the Institute for Sustainable Futures and ERI and other researchers here on the call are having this as a topic is air pollution is a big deal. It kills something like 7 to 9 million people per year globally, and it just simply costs a lot. So among the risk factors for total number of deaths, you can see on the chart that ambient particulate matter, which I'll talk about, and ozone, which I'll talk about, both show up, but also household air pollution shows up and features pretty prominently. So what I'm going to present is largely what we know about air pollutants in general, and a lot of that is known from the outdoor environment, and then pass it over to my colleagues who will really narrow down on the indoor environment. So can I have the next slide, please? So let's talk about outside in. Outdoor air quality indeed impacts indoor air quality. About half of the dust in your home is from outside your home. And that percentage increases when it's dry outside, when there's fires outside, when you maybe have a lower use of air conditioning, which treats the air inside. But yeah, a fair amount of the material in your house is actually coming from outside, which probably is kind of obvious. There's a lot of indoor air pollutants, however, that are significantly differ in their chemistry and their form than the outdoor pollutants, and that's why we're going to be passing it over to the indoor folks a little bit later on. Some of these indoor ones, as you're going to hear about, is off-gassing from materials like for example, inside your car, the new car smell. Those are actually a bunch of organic constituents off-gassing into your car. These new emerging chemicals are in a lot of household products. They're called PFAS chemicals. Of course, if you have pets, you know that they produce a lot of their own indoor air pollutants through dander, mold, combustion sources. I think we'll pick up on the fact that your furnace and your gas stove can be significant inputs to air pollutants inside your home. Some of them are a little bit less obvious. Can I have the next slide, please, Janet? Over a couple years before the pandemic, we were measuring the chemistry of people's indoor dust. We had an opportunity during the height of the pandemic to remeasure that same dust. And if you recall, during COVID, during the peak of the shutdown, we didn't really know what was going on, how to protect ourselves. So we'd keep products outside, or we'd bring them inside and swab them with all kinds of disinfectant materials. Well, we found that during the middle of the COVID, the amount of the one particular chemical, which is a carcinogen that's present in a lot of disinfecting materials, doubled inside people's homes during COVID. We're such maniacs trying to protect ourselves from COVID that we're killing ourselves via some other air pollutants. So there's a few surprises that I think make research work on indoor air quality all that much more compelling and such an exciting field. Can the next slide, please? So there's a lot of regulated air pollutants that we've known about for quite a long time, and they're regulated because we have ways to limit and reduce the concentration of a lot of those. Some of these are gases. As you can see, some of them are particulate matter. Some of the particulate matter is the very, very fine material, which I'm going to be talking about in the next 5 slides or so. It's called PM 2.5. It just means it's small enough in diameter that not only does it penetrate into your lungs, but it actually goes all the way down to your small airways, which are really critical because those airways are what's we use to exchange gases, right? It's what we use to exchange oxygen into our blood and carbon dioxide out of our blood. So when those small airways are impaired, you can have significant cardiopulmonary issues, including various pulmonary fibroses and COPD and other conditions you've heard about. And so these are both components. They're typically measured separate from each other. And in almost all areas of the country, there are at least a few monitors that are continually measuring these criterion air pollutants so that they can be not only monitored but mitigated if there's a particular source of these pollutants. Can the next slide, please? We've developed the Environmental Protection Agency, as well as now a lot of international agencies have developed a very simple color coding for this called the AQI, or Air Quality Index. You're all very familiar with this. And we have used this, a lot of it in the outdoor environment. Much of this is driven by the particulate matter, that really fine particulate matter. But you know this normal scale because you get it on your phone now. Green, yellow, orange, and then it gets down to really bad colors that you don't want to see. The US in general has pretty clean air compared to outdoor air compared to what it used to have. I do a lot of research work in Pakistan, and Pakistan regularly gets to the maroon scale in their winter months, which means that cumulatively that indicates a substantial decrease in net life expectancy for a lot of Pakistanis. The poor air is thought to reduce their lifespan by about 2 to 3 years. So again, it's a big deal. Next slide, please. So these fine particulate matter is super, super, super small. It's actually microscopic. You can't actually see it in the air. And it contributes to, like I said, a lot of pulmonary issues. I don't want to discount other kind of slightly coarser materials like PM10. That's the dust, pollen, and mold. So this is slightly bigger. They get trapped in your bronchia and upper airways. And then usually they get expelled just through coughing and the normal mucus secretions we have. However, those are the same materials that can, if you have a susceptibility to asthma, they can trigger asthma attacks. Because a lot of those asthma attacks are actually triggered by in the upper airways. So both of these are a big concern. We consider PM 2.5 to be probably a little bit more of the chronic concern that that people should be aware of. Can I have a next slide, please? It has, as I mentioned, serious long-term effects. It also has some acute problems. I'm going to talk about some of the acute problems in a little bit more detail in a following slide. But if you live in an area that has consistently high amounts of this fine particulate, which could come from combustion sources or any number of industrial materials, you tend to have a higher odds of having heart disease and worsened lung disease. But if you get an event, a PM 2.5 event, and I'll show you an example of that, you can get actually very acute problems. And in these times when you have very high concentrations of PM 2.5, hospital intakes from stroke, from heart attack, and asthma increase substantially. So even for a short-term exposure, it's very, very unhealthy. Can I have the next slide, please? In general, air pollutants cause a number of medical issues. I think we're going to get into some of those a little bit later on, but they're very well documented. Some of the more recent research indicates that at the very small particulate matter sizes, even smaller than PM 2.5, that material is so small that it actually can sometimes pass into your bloodstream. It's been found in placentas and in some studies in England. So we're experimenting with some bad air chemistry that we would like to avoid, right? Because these particulate matters can have some very long-term effects, like neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's. Have a next slide, please. In the world of air quality, climate change is not our friend. We've done a number of projections of climate change, even right here in Indiana, and we expect it to get hotter. And could I have the next slide, please? Particularly cities will get hotter, and some of the cities, particularly, for example, Evansville, Indiana, will see a lot of days of various highly dangerous heat days. So why am I talking about heat when we're talking about air quality? Well, heat compounds air quality issues. It compounds the production of this small particulate matter, PM 2.5, and it substantially increases ozone in cities. So hotter days have much worse air quality than cooler days, but it depends on where you live, right? South Bend, Indiana, they probably would prioritize less of their focus on PM 2.5, ozone, and extreme heat days than would Evansville, Indiana. The next slide, please. Why is this? Why are cities factories for bad air? Well, this is why. They have a concentration of materials in them that heat up at a disproportionately high rates during the day and then never really cool down at night. So this contributes to particularly high ozone production in cities. You can see even from this cartoon that there's ways to mitigate that. For example, urban parks of certain sizes, they can even be very small ones, have substantially cooler temperatures than areas right beside them, which tells you that, although we've inadvertently engineered bad air into our cities, we can intentionally engineer better air into our cities. Have the next slide, please. Here's an example of what extreme difference that really looks like over a summer. This is 2 summers ago. Those who live in Indianapolis are familiar with these 2 areas. One of them on the upper left is the International Marketplace. So it's 38th Street and near the 465. The one on the right is a residential neighborhood called Crow's Nest near Broad Ripple and Meridian Kessler. You can see there's a significant difference in greenness between those 2 areas, right? On that chart on the bottom is surface temperature, which is simply one way of measuring temperature differences in a city. At that same day, same point of time, the international marketplace has temperatures that are 103 degrees Fahrenheit, whereas Crow's Nest is 85 degrees Fahrenheit. So almost a 20 degree Fahrenheit difference in surface temperatures, which relates also to a difference in air pollution indices. And that scale on the bottom is just how green this is. So we could see if we engineer green pockets in cities near where residences are, we'll accrue several positive effects. Not only will they be cooler, but they'll also be more resilient to extreme heat and extreme precipitation effects. So this to me is like the most stark vision of how a city could be and how cities actually are, and the fact that it's fine if we have areas of cities that are very hot, as long as that's where people work and there's air conditioning. It's not fine if they're right next to low-income communities, which is exactly where international marketplace is. Can I have the next slide, please? So what does this look like in terms of what I've been talking about early on, the particulate matter? These are measures of particulate matter, the PM 2.5 on the left. And you can see that these are sensors that we've put out as Environmental Resilience Institute. You can see that some of the sensors that are relatively orange on this just given day, orange is starting to get into the hazardous area, are theirs where we had historical redlining. That's the map on the right, which showed areas where we intentionally place a significant amount of what we call gray infrastructure, so concrete roads and factories, as opposed to areas that are more yellow and green on the right, which is more green infrastructure. So we've built in a lot of structural inequities in terms of air quality that we need to unbuild if we want to have a more sustainable, healthier cities. But can I have the next slide, please? Even best intentions don't protect you from other kinds of air quality events. Anyone who was in Indiana 2 summers ago will remember 3 to 4 waves of extremely smoking conditions from Alberta wildfires. So the plume of smoke from the Alberta wildfires wafted PM 2.5 all over central Indiana. So in this case, it didn't matter whether you had a lot of green infrastructure or gray infrastructure. Air quality was dangerous. And in fact, in this time, we're doing an analysis right now, a retrospective analysis of how much percent higher intake rates were in emergency rooms for various cardiopulmonary conditions. But I know that I personally felt this. I'm not really susceptible to poor air. But I went through, and my colleagues did, several days of being irritable, not being able to concentrate, being tired. And these are some of the consequences of breathing in this stuff. And in this case, even going inside and turning on your air conditioner, it would relieve you somewhat, but not completely. And think about all the people who can't afford air conditioning. Have a next slide, please. And now I'm going to turn it back over to you, Janet, to walk us off.
Okay, great. Thank you, Gabe. My part of this presentation will take relatively less time because my job is to talk about the regulations and laws that address indoor air quality, and there aren't that many. We start with our basic Federal Clean Air Act, which was passed originally in 1970 and has led to vast reductions in air pollution across the country. Although, as Gabe has explained, much areas of concern still remain from certain types of pollutants. But the Federal Clean Air Act focuses on the outdoor air. And it identifies main pollutants that we're exposed to in our outdoor air, which come significantly from transportation and power generation sources, but from lots of other types of activity, industrial activity, as well as people using gas-powered lawnmowers and painting houses and disinfecting their homes. And so we have a very comprehensive system for addressing outdoor air quality. But federal laws don't do too much to address indoor air quality. The federal agencies have over the years, EPA, the Centers for Disease Control, other agencies have traditionally provided a lot of guidance and information, have supported research around indoor air quality. EPA has an Office of Indoor Air Quality, and you may have interacted with some of those folks. They do mostly non-regulatory work. There are a couple of exceptions to that. There are federal rules that govern certain very hazardous materials. So if you've ever had asbestos removed in your house, or you've been involved with commercial asbestos removal, you know, I hope, that in order to work with asbestos and remove it, you have to be trained and licensed. And so there's a system for setting standards for that and making sure that that gets done. And that is administered by the state of Indiana on behalf of the federal government. There are similar programs for addressing lead paint removal. The major source of lead in our environment for many years was lead in gasoline. And when EPA banned lead in gasoline, the levels of lead in children's blood in this country plummeted. However, sources of lead exposure still remain. They are significantly from lead paint, which, although it's been banned for many years, still exists in many homes across the country. And there's also residual lead dust in our soil. And if you took a sample of soil from along a heavily traveled street in your community, chances are that you would find high lead, and that turns into dust and gets into people's houses. That's an area where the federal government does expect people to be licensed and certified and trained. Radon is another indoor air pollutant. It's a naturally occurring air pollutant, and many of you may have had issues with radon in your home. I have had radon in more than one home that I've lived in. And we do have some legal systems that address that. Again, you can't just be anybody and go around and tell people you're going to fix their radon. You have to actually be trained and certified. There are also some provisions in real estate disclosures where if you are aware that you have high radon in your home, you're required to disclose that as part of a real estate transaction. And another category of air quality that starts in the outdoors but gets into the indoors is fugitive dust. We have rules here in Indiana that require companies or operations that can create situations of fugitive dust to try to minimize those. So for example, if you have a big industrial operation like a steel mill, for example, and it's got a lot of dusty roadways with big vehicles driving around, you may be required through your permit from the Indiana Department of Environmental Management to make sure that you're watering those roadways or otherwise suppressing the dust, because what happens is it turns into dust on the factory property and then it blows into your house. And that is not a happy situation. There are some Indiana authorities around indoor air, but they are not the kinds of requirements that we have when it comes to outdoor air quality. So the Indiana Department of Health is the main agency that focuses on indoor air quality. They have requirements around schools, where indoor air quality is an issue that schools need to pay attention to. And if there's a concern about indoor air quality, the State Department of Health will support local health departments in doing investigations. The health department will also support local health departments in doing investigations in residential property and other properties. And they have some responsibilities with respect to educating the public about indoor air quality. They've supported a statewide asthma coalition for many years. I mentioned real estate disclosures. It doesn't just apply to radon. If you have any known hazard in your home, asbestos, lead, mold, other things, you're required to disclose them. Unfortunately, one result of that is sometimes people don't actually ask the question. They don't have the tester come so that they will be able to say, well, I didn't know. So a bit of a two-edged sword. Local health departments also have authority under state law to they take responsibility for helping make sure that housing is safe and healthful And so they can investigate conditions. But I need to caveat that by acknowledging that there is much very deteriorated housing stock in Indiana, where there absolutely are indoor air quality concerns, from mold, from pest infestations, from radon, from lead. They are not always the tenants, people who live in housing with those issues, do not always have the power or the oomph or the ability to have those situations addressed, even though the local health departments are there to help them. So that's a little bit of a flyover of the legal requirements. A question might be, well, why don't we regulate indoor air quality more than we do? And I don't actually know the answer to that, if there is an answer to that, but I can tell you that Congress over the years has been more willing to focus on air quality outside, air pollutants that are produced by activities that we all engage in, and less inclined to get inside people's homes and start passing laws and rules about what we as individuals are expected or required to do in our own homes. With that, Gabe, is there anything you want to say by way of wrapping this section up?
No, I think that was great.
All right, I'm going to stop sharing and turn it back to you, Lynn.
Great, thanks, Janet. Are there one or two questions that you have for anyone attending, have for Gabe or Janet? I know there was a couple in the Q&A that are being answered as we go through, but I want to give an opportunity for anyone who is in the audience or before we move on. Okay, I will go ahead and keep providing questions in Q&A, which is very useful. We do have a couple of ones that I'll just look to see. Are there public records to see if there are radon? And is it, can you look up public records to see certifications of radon firms? Which I guess what they mean if a house has had radon contamination.
Or is it to find out if a particular firm that holds itself out as a radon firm is actually certified? I think so. I will try to research that.
Okay, look up that answer.
Yep.
Okay. Why does Indiana consistently rank 49th or 50th in air quality when we have taxpayer-funded agencies to protect our air and health?
Well, we are an industrial state. There's no question about that. So there are a lot of emissions. There's a lot of power generation in Indiana along the Ohio River. There's a high percentage of that power that's produced by fossil fuel, coal in particular. So we have a lot of sources in Indiana. IDEM implements the federal programs. We are precluded in this state from passing any rules that are more strict than the federal minimum. So that's one reason that perhaps that we're ranking low. It's a matter of public priorities and balances that people make, and the level of funding and support that those agencies get. Gabe, I don't know if you have anything you want to add to that.
There's a whole slew of other questions in there, but we need to move on to our next section looking at indoor air quality. So I encourage all of our speakers, if you have any other comments. So Joe did comment that the IDOH has Indiana radon licensing information, and so that is in the, we'll share that in the chat for everyone. Okay, I'd like to hand it over now to Dr. Brandon Bohr, Dr. Nusrat Young, and Dr. Phil Stevens, talking a little bit more about indoor health and providing some more kind of tools in your toolkit to improve your own air in your own home and surroundings through your own actions and behavior, as well as some filtering and other ideas. So I'm going to hand it over. I think Dr. Brandon Bohr is going to be managing the slides, and they should be up. So here they are.
Thank you, Lynn. So Professor Nusrat Jung, Professor Philip Stevens, and myself will share results from some of our ongoing and recent collaborative research between Purdue University and Indiana University. While we may be rivals on the basketball court, not so sure about the football field. IU has taken pretty large leaps there. But we do come together to study indoor air quality, and the three of us and our graduate students over the past several years have published a number of interesting papers looking at sources of indoor air pollution, looking at particulate matter and different types of chemical pollutants. So Professor Jung will start.
Thank you very much, Brandon. Thank you, Lynn, for a wonderful introduction. I want to also start by thanking the speakers before me, Janet and Gabe, for providing such an excellent foundation and framing of the topic, and their insights into the broader context of outdoor and indoor environmental quality really sets the stage for what we would like to focus on today. So let me begin by showing you a very real example that is very relatable of how indoor air pollution can arise from everyday routines. This slide highlights heat-based hairstyling, a common activity that you may conduct in your home every day. And when flat irons or curling irons are used with the personal care products, especially those containing cyclic siloxanes, they can release volatile chemicals into the air. So on the right-hand side, you see real-time data from our published study. And the stacked area plot shows the time-resolved concentrations of different siloxanes. Siloxanes are constituents of the product that was part of what was applied on the hair. So from D3 to D6, you see also linear siloxanes, L3 and L5. So siloxanes are quite interesting compound. They are known to be persistent. They are also known to be bioaccumulative, and they are also known to be toxic. So these were measured in a test house that we have here at Purdue University using a mass spectrometer. And we asked people to come in our lab and replicate their everyday hair care routine. They divided the hair in 4 parts, which is why you see 4 mounds of emissions that increase with each section of the hair being styled. So this example demonstrates 2 key points. First, that indoor air is dynamic and chemically complex. And it is not just passive exposure to outdoor pollution. Second, the emissions from consumer behaviors, particularly personal care products, are non-trivial, and this deserve more attention. Next slide, please. So in addition to siloxanes, another class of emissions that deserves attention during personal care activities is airborne nanoparticles. These are those very, very small particles that Gabe was talking about. This slide shows results from another controlled study we had here at Purdue University, recently published in Environmental Science and Technology. When we used heat-based tools like curling irons, flat irons on real hair, we observed a dramatic burst of airborne nanoparticles. On the top panel, you see a particle size distribution heat map showing that the majority of the particles emitted are in 10 to 500 nanometer range. So really, really tiny. The bottom panel shows the total particle number concentrations. These are the very small nanoparticles that can deposit deep in the lungs and potentially translocate into the bloodstream. What's important here is not just the emission magnitude, but that it is episodic and the poorly ventilated context in which these activities occur. So everyday hair care routines, often carried out in small bathrooms with low ventilation, can lead to very high short-term exposure to nanoparticles with unknown long-term health implications. Next, please. So let's shift now from personal care products to cleaning activities. Remember, I'm going to talk about things that we do in our indoor environment and how they may be contributing to our indoor pollution. So this slide shows what happens to indoor air chemistry when we use common ethanol-based disinfectant sprays, like the ones many of us started using more frequently during COVID-19 pandemic. The graph here shows time-resolved measurements of airborne chemical concentrations after using two different products. So in this case, ethanol dominates the emissions in both cases, but we also detected substantial quantities of essential oil, fragrance compounds, and other oxygenated and hydrocarbon species. These compounds linger in the air well after the surface has dried up, remaining elevated from up to 60 to 80 minutes post activity. So the key point here is that the disinfectants don't just clean surfaces, they temporarily transform indoor air into complex chemical mixtures in poorly ventilated homes. And this could lead to short-term exposure of tens of micrograms per cubic meter of airborne chemicals. So we need to start treating these products not just as cleaners, but as indoor chemical emitters, especially when used daily. Next slide, please. Perhaps my colleague Phil would like to join and share a little bit more detail on the cleaning products at the study we worked on at IU. Phil?
Oh, sure. Thanks, Nu. So in addition to just the general emissions that come from cleaning, I think we also have to worry about the chemical transformations that occur from these emissions. And that's something that, when I first started studying indoor, I didn't realize how important it was. Gabe talked about, formation of pollutants like ozone and PM 2.5. We often call those secondary pollutants because in the outdoor atmosphere, they're produced by chemical reactions that then lead to oxygenated compounds that then can condense and form particles as well as forming ozone. We didn't realize that this could happen also indoors. So here's an experiment that we did in a room where we mopped with basically a pine citrus scented typical cleaner you would find at Kroger. And the little gray areas are showing the two mopping episodes, and the top panel shows the concentrations of some of these reactive emissions that give you that nice lemon smell that you would think would be very clean and things like that. And the next panel shows that all of a sudden that the ozone that's in the room starts disappearing because it's reacting with these emissions. And then that we could follow that chemistry going, showing the oxidation, the radicals that produce that in the third panel. And in the fourth panel, you get the oxidation products, and then that color panel shows the formation of very fine particles. And so we can see this chemistry occurring, and that these particles can lead to inhalation rates that are equivalent to what you might breathe in outdoors in an urban area. And this was especially important during the pandemic when we were doing lots of cleaning, and that people who were cleaning, areas routinely, maybe even more often, were then possibly exposed to much higher levels of these particles than they would have been when, in non-pandemic conditions. So I think that's something that is really important to start understanding, is some of these chemical transformations that can also occur indoors. You can go to the next slide.
So along with disinfectants, something else you would find in a common Walmart aisle is aromatherapy products like wax warmers or scented candles. So this is another common but often overlooked source of indoor air pollution. What you see here is a time series of terpene emissions during the use of scented wax warmer products in a residential living room environment. So remember, Phil just mentioned to you the smell of lemon, right? So that's terpene emissions. The top graph shows mixing ratios of different terpenes, which are fragrance compounds. So as the warmer or the wax warmer operates, these emissions spike sharply, and they remain elevated with decay continuing well after it is turned off. So importantly, the bottom panel shows that indoor ozone concentration dropped during use. Also, my colleague Phil just showed you that indoor ozone concentration dropped when we were using pine sol on the flooring, cleaning the floor. So this is because terpenes react with ozone. Ozone is naturally occurring in our outdoor environment. It travels from outdoor to our indoor environment, and then it participates in this chemical reaction, forming secondary reaction products that Phil also explained. So while these products may be creating a relaxing ambiance, they also trigger complex indoor chemistry that is completely invisible to our eyes and that changes what we breathe, what we take in our lungs. So we should start treating these as sources of reactive air pollutants, not just harmless scented scenarios. Next, please. So on the previous slide, we talked about terpene emissions from fragrance wax warmer, but there is another hidden type of byproducts from these products, nanoparticles. What you see here are size resolved number concentration of particles emitted during operation of a scented wax warmer under two different ventilation conditions. In both cases, whether the air exchange rate was 3 or 6.5, air exchange rate essentially here means that the air is being changed for the whole of that house 3 times in 1 hour or 6.5 times in 1 hour. What we observe is a burst of newly formed nanoparticles right after the wax warmer is turned on. Most particles are in the range of 1 to 10 nanometer in size. These are really, really, really tiny particles, suggesting that these are nucleation mode particles formed through gas to particle conversion. That means it was something else, and due to reactions, it became something else. So these are likely products of ozone terpene reactions, other chemical reactions, creating low volatility organics that nucleate and grow into airborne nanoparticles. This is important because these tiny particles can penetrate deep into the lungs. Their indoor sources are poorly understood. They are, of course, not regulated, just as Janet explained to us. And this slide reinforces why even seemingly harmless lifestyle products like wax warmers can significantly impact indoor air chemistry and therefore our health, because we do spend 90% of our time indoors. I will pass the presentation on to my colleague Brandon, who will share more of his discoveries.
Thank you, Nusrat and Phil, for giving us an introduction to some common sources of indoor air pollution. Another prominent source is cooking, and whether we're using a gas stove or an electric stove, cooking produces indoor air pollution in the form of small particulate matter, as well as a variety of reactive gases. So one study that we worked on was looking at the impact of gas stoves on indoor air quality. So gas stoves, the combustion process produces significant quantities of very small nanoparticles, just like we saw with the indoor chemistry observed with the scented cleaning and aromatherapy products. So the combustion process produces very small particles down to a few nanometers in size. The reason this is important is because these very small nanoparticles deposit efficiently throughout our respiratory systems, both in the head airways and the deeper regions of the lungs. This is important because they can translocate to other organs, including our brains. So we're very much interested in what might be our exposures to combustion-derived nanoparticles while cooking. This plot here shows the size distributions of these very small nanoparticles down to 1 nanometers when we were operating a gas stove during a normal cooking process. The concentrations were very high, much higher than what we would be exposed to if we were standing outside near a busy street. So we have a lot of work that is done looking at reducing emissions from vehicle exhaust, and that's very important for improving outdoor air quality, but not much on indoor sources of nanoparticles like gas stoves. We had found in some subsequent experiments that if you're using your kitchen exhaust hood, if it's venting outdoors, that can reduce your exposure to these small particles, but does not entirely eliminate your exposure. So there's certain considerations we need to make to how we, design our kitchen environments, what type of fuel we're using to reduce our exposures.
So in addition to worrying about the direct emissions, again, you can tell I'm a chemist, that we have to also, while we're cooking, worry about the chemical transformations that can occur. So these are showing you data from an experiment we did down in Texas where we simulated a Thanksgiving dinner in June, where we were using a gas stove very early in the morning and continuously cooking and using the oven to bake the turkey. And the emissions of nitrogen oxides, the NO there, of course, from the gas stove, were elevated. Nitrous acid, which is the HONO, was also elevated. And you can see other sources of alkenes, volatile organic compounds that are reactive. And what we found was that even during these indoor cooking episodes, you could produce high concentrations of oxidants, primarily the hydroxyl radical, which is often called the Pac-Man of the atmosphere because outdoors it leads to the chemical transformations that can lead to PM 2.5 as well as ozone formation. And outdoors, that source is usually driven by sunlight. And so we didn't expect to see a lot of these oxidants indoors. Yet during this cooking episode, the bottom plots shows you levels of this Pac-Man of the atmosphere that are equal, if not even higher than what you might see outdoors, which means a lot of the VOCs that were emitted during this cooking process that came from the oils and everything that you're using to cook are getting transformed by these oxidants into oxygenated compounds, which then may have more toxic effects. And so, again, we did these experiments without without venting, because a lot of people don't use the vent over your stove because it's noisy. So this is kind of showing you the impact if you don't use your overhead vents to remove pollutants. You can then be creating very high concentrations of these pollutants during cooking.
So in addition to gas stoves, cooking on an electric stove can also release pollution into our kitchens. So we've done a number of studies here at Purdue in a net zero energy house, looking at the production of very small, what we call ultrafine particles. These are particles smaller than 100 nanometers in size. In this particular kitchen environment, we had electrical kitchen appliances, including the stovetop, oven, toaster, microwave. And we found that when these appliances were being used for cooking activities, the abundance of these very small particles would increase, approaching levels outdoors or exceeding levels outdoors. So we can see that not only is gas combustion a source of these small particles, but just any sort of cooking activity involving high temperature processes that you may find, for example, in an oven or a toaster. So in addition to gas stoves as a prominent source of indoor combustion, we also tend to use candles indoors for a variety of purposes. Candles are a prominent source of these small nanoparticles as well. You can see a plot here of a particle size distribution going down to 1 nanometer in size. So these are incredibly small particles that are present in the indoor atmosphere when we're burning a candle. Many of these particles are just a few nanometers in size. And the reason we are concerned about this is because, again, they deposit very efficiently throughout our respiratory systems. These small nanoparticles have been associated with adverse respiratory, cardiovascular, and neurological health outcomes. And a recent study showed that just a few hours of exposure to candle combustion can adversely affect cognitive function in adults. So we have a lot of interest in understanding how candles, which we use to create a warm environment inside our homes, affects indoor air quality. And they're quite potent emitters of these small nanoparticles. So moving on to another type of indoor environment, outside of the home, we have indoor aquatic centers. So a few years ago here at Purdue, we did some measurements in our indoor aquatic center during a swim meet, a collegiate swim meet involving Purdue and a few other universities. And what we found is that the chlorine that we add to pool water for disinfection purposes can react with other things in the water to produce volatile gases that are released into the air that the swimmers are exposed to. And we made some measurements very close to the surface of the water and found that the swimming motion can help transmit more of these chemicals to the air just above the water surface. These chemicals include chloramines. This gives us this characteristic chlorine smell inside swimming pools. You can see in this plot here, when we had more swimmers present, they were mixing the water, splashing it, and that promoted the emissions of these chloramine species into the air. These chloramines can cause irritation to the lungs and to the eyes. And what may be of concern is that since swimmers are breathing in a lot of air just above the water surface, they may be exposed to elevated concentrations of these indoor air pollutants. So we need to be thinking not only about improving ventilation in our homes, schools, offices, and so forth, but other environments like large swimming pools where you have unique indoor air quality considerations. So talking about offices, we also did a study here at Purdue in our living laboratory offices. These are 4 very controlled graduate student offices where we can manipulate the ventilation conditions and observe what happens in a typical office environment. So in the home, of course, we do cooking, cleaning activities, apply personal care products. That is a unique space. In the office, perhaps we're not doing those type of activities. So a big driver of indoor air pollution in a office environment that's heavily occupied is people. So we emit chemicals from our bodies through different mechanisms, including, for example, metabolism. We're releasing carbon dioxide continually through our exhaled breath, but also an array of volatile organic compounds that are being released through our breath, through our skin and sweat, and through the personal care products that we apply to our bodies, things like deodorant and hair care products. So in this study, we found that when people walk into the office and they get seated and they start to work, we see a relatively significant elevation in the chemical complexity of the indoor air. And that's what you can see here in this stack plot. The occupancy is shown here in the gray line at the bottom. So more people in the office drove increased concentrations of a variety of chemical species. And what we found is that not only affects the quality of the air indoors, it can also affect outdoor air quality because the building is continually discharging these chemicals to the outdoor environment. A big chunk of this plot here were siloxanes and monoterpenes, which we talked about previously, components of both personal care products applied to the body as well as cleaning products that may be used in the office space. Another important component of the indoor environment is dust, and specifically the hazardous materials that may be found in dust, including heavy metals and persistent organic pollutants. Dust itself is not stationary. It can be released into the air where we can inhale it through a process we call particle resuspension. So we have done some work looking at how babies stir up dust as they crawl around on the floor. So we may have these kind of short-term episodic emission events of indoor dust when babies and also adults are disturbing these dust deposits. For babies, this includes crawling. For adults, walking across the floor. We're agitating these dust particles, kicking them up into the air, and creating these so-called personal clouds of dust particles around us. Now, these are larger particles than the particles we were talking about previously, a few micrometers in size. But what we see with infants, since they're so close to the floor during their crawling and play activity, they can be exposed to elevated concentrations of these large particles. These particles can, of course, include a lot of biological content of dust, bacteria, mold, and so forth, as well as a number of different chemical species. And then we found through some modeling analysis that a lot of these particles can deposit quite efficiently in the respiratory system of the infant. So as your child is crawling around the floor, they're stirring up this dust. And we need to be mindful then of sources of that dust and how to remove it effectively. Vacuuming is a great way to remove that dust. The vacuuming process itself can also release dust into the air. We should be careful with that. And typically carpets contain more dust than hard flooring. So generally exposures to resuspended dust can be greater if you have carpeted flooring in your house versus hard flooring.
Oh, yeah. So I wanted to talk about, so far we have focused on, sources of indoor pollutants. And now what becomes really important is, because we shared so many hidden sources of indoor air pollutants with you, is there any way that you can measure them? So there are some in-home air quality monitors like the ones shown here. And they are becoming more accessible and user-friendly. They typically combine sensor technology to measure pollutants like PM 2.5, volatile organic compounds, carbon dioxide, and even radon. So the one on the picture that is shown also measures radon. So this particular monitor, the AirThings, was rated by New York Times Wirecutter as one of the best radon monitoring unit that is out there. So similar to this, there are quite many monitoring sensors available. They may start from price range of between $100 to $350. And if you simply go on Amazon, you are able to find the ones that can both provide you with a digital display of what your air quality may be in your house and give you real-time updates via mobile app. So making it easier for families to track indoor pollution levels. So these devices are helpful. They do empower people to better understand their indoor environments, especially because a lot of the pollutants we spoke about today with you in both in gas phase and particle phase, because we spoke to you about these chemical reactions that are happening. And then we talked to you about particles in all size ranges, very small to very large. It really helps people understand their indoor environments. And if you have that information, how your environment is changing while you conduct these activities, you may be able to improve your ventilation, adjust your cleaning practices, start purchasing products that are less polluting or less chemically complex, and work towards reducing your exposure to specific sources like candles or sprays. So as the awareness of indoor air grows, these type of consumer technologies we believe will play a critical role in education, in behavior change, and hopefully encourage many of you to participate in our science using mechanisms called as citizen science, where you're able to measure your pollutants in your home environment.
And lastly, we'd like to briefly touch on techniques to improve indoor air quality. So we presented a variety of sources of indoor air pollution. And one way to improve air quality in our home environment is source control. So trying to eliminate sources when appropriate. This cannot be done all the time because we do need to cook, we do need to clean, and there are a number of activities that inherently generate pollution that would be difficult to avoid. But we should aim to use products that may be low emitting. There are some labs that evaluate products for the emissions of volatile chemicals, and we can find both building materials, interior furnishings, and cleaning products that would be less harmful to our indoor environments with respect to emissions of potentially hazardous chemicals. If we are looking at cooking or other combustion processes, we would like to extract the air as efficiently as possible near the source. So using a kitchen hood that vents to the outdoors is a good solution. Many kitchen hoods, unfortunately, are recirculating. So they just pass the air through a greased filter. They are not actively filtering the air. And often, even if we do have a kitchen hood that vents to the outside, many people do not use the hood because of the noise and other effects of having that hood on for extended periods. With respect to ventilation, we should try to improve ventilation. This can be more difficult in the residential environment than a commercial or office building. If possible, bring in more outdoor air. However, then we have to be mindful of the pollution in the outdoor air, so that outdoor air needs to be appropriately filtered and pass through a high efficiency filter so we can scrub out particulate matter. Typically, we're not using filtration or air cleaning technologies that can actively remove other pollutants that may be in outdoor air, like ozone, nitrogen oxides, volatile chemicals, and so forth. So that remains a concern. But ventilation generally helps dilute indoor generated pollutants. Just have to be careful about where the building is located and the outdoor air conditions. With respect to indoor or outdoor sources of pollution that can affect our home environment, filters placed within the occupied space, portable air purification units like the one shown here. This is a do-it-yourself Horsey Rosenthal box that people were creating during the COVID-19 pandemic. So these type of portable air purification units can provide additional air cleaning throughout the home. Typically, a filter box such as this can serve one large room. So you might need to install a few of these throughout your house. You can, of course, buy commercial air purification units from Walmart, Home Depot, Target. They can be $100 to a few $100s. And it can be quite effective at removing particulate matter. Again, we don't generally have great technology available for removing other contaminants in the air. There are air filters that can remove volatile organic compounds called activated carbon filters, but their lifespan might be relatively short. So generally better ventilation, better filtration, source control are strategies that we can take to improve air quality in our home. If you are dealing with something like a wildfire event, you would probably want to install these type of air purification units and try your best to monitor the amount of outdoor air that's entering the indoor space. So that's all we have here. I can answer some questions.
Great, thanks so much. There's a few kind of the highest level questions here that we have in Q&A, and one of them, which I think is interesting, is the impact of whole house filters on this cleaning process. And I would also add the MERV number. So in terms of how frequently and how effective, and issues of the MERV level for whole house filters.
That's a good question. So MERV stands for Minimum Efficiency Reporting Value, and it's a metric that was developed by ASHRAE, the American Society of Heating, Refrigeration, and Air Conditioning Engineers. And I was on the voting committee for the standard that rates this MERV rating. And generally, the higher the number, the better the filter, the more efficient the filter is. We go up to MERV 16. Typically, that's not necessarily a filter that you would buy for your house, more used for commercial buildings. But we can buy MERV filters like MERV 13, MERV 14 that are quite efficient at removing particles. Unfortunately, some of them are electrostatically enhanced. And we've done a lot of experiments on this at Purdue. And these electrostatically enhanced filters, even if they have a high MERV rating, like MERV 14, their performance degrades quite rapidly over time as the filter accumulates particles. Basically, we kind of discharge the filter media, and its ability to capture small particles in the air drops off quite quickly. So we should be looking for mechanical filters of a high efficiency, something like a MERV 13 or 14, is quite effective. They do get clogged over time, and that can have some potentially adverse impacts on indoor air quality, because if they get clogged, it's harder for the fans in your furnace to circulate air throughout your house. So you can have situations where a loaded filter can drop off the ventilation flow in your house. So we do want to be, keeping an eye on these filters, replacing them every several months would be good. Interestingly, in some cases, for some types of filters, as they get clogged, they can become more efficient, because all those particles that deposit, this dust cake you may see on your furnace filter when you remove it, can actually help trap other particles. So a high MERV rated filter is an effective solution. Now, if you have a furnace, keep in mind that's only running when you're based on your thermostat. So you may have situations where, based on the thermostat set point in your home, your furnace filter is not actively doing anything to improve air quality. It only works when air is being circulated through your furnace to meet the temperature set point of your thermostat. So this is where I would recommend something like a portable air purification unit, because you could plug that into the wall and it can operate continuously even when your furnace is not operational. So that's a good strategy for kind of continuous air purification in the home. And with portable air purification units, I'd recommend those that use HEPA filters that have high efficiency in removing small particles. We would want to stay away from kind of questionable technologies like bipolar ionization devices and others that have been shown through systematic studies not to effectively clean the air. So high efficiency filters, HEPA, high MERV rated filters are a very effective solution.
Great. Thank you very much, Brandon. There's a couple of other questions in the chat, if you guys can look through those as we move on. And I do apologize, I didn't go through our last panelist's full bios, but I do want to just focus more on the time that we have for Joe and Heidi to talk a little bit more about public spaces, and for sure we'll get some more answers to those questions in the Q&A. Thank you very much. So moving on to Joe and Heidi for public spaces and standards there.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Lynn. Me and Heidi are going to be bringing it home here, and just bear with me as I get our PowerPoints up. I am a Teams person by trade, so, but we ran through this ahead of time, so hopefully it'll go smoothly. Okay, can people see it yet?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay. Okay, gonna have to do this way, and then from the beginning. How about now?
Okay, yeah, but it's the whole thing. There we go. Perfect.
Okay, perfect.
All right, power on.
Thank you. Yeah, I had to do it my little roundabout way because that's how I know of doing it. So I'm Jocelyn Kiernan. You hear me referred to as Joe. I'll respond to either or. So don't worry about that. I serve as our Director of Environmental Health here at Hoosier Environmental Council. You might also notice this little logo that says Improving Kids' Environment. And if you are an HEC supporter and you're wondering what that means, essentially IKE is our environmental health division around improving kids' environments. And what we do is we focus on children's environmental health issues related to lead poisoning and asthma triggers specifically. So that's what we're going to talk to you about today, is kind of taking all that wonderful research that the other folks have presented on and thinking, how can we address these things within our schools and then within our homes? And of course, we have the lovely Dr. Heidi Beidinger-Burnett, who serves as faculty professor of practice in global health at the University of Notre Dame. She also co-leads the Notre Dame Lead Innovation Team. So she's got some really great expert knowledge on lead, and she'll be talking on that. So I'm just going to hand it over to her, and then we'll move it over to me to kind of bring it home with these final resources.
Awesome. Thanks, Joe. So Joe already introduced me. I'm faculty here at the University of Notre Dame. I also want to let you know that I co-founded the Notre Dame Lead Innovation Team. We're a group of individuals, interdisciplinary faculty here at University of Notre Dame, looking for practical ways to help families deal with lead in their home environment, and then more largely looking at environmental health. So the conversation that we're going to have now is definitely informed by my work, not only in public health, but the community-based research that I've done in this space. The time that I've spent at CDC and in health departments and so forth have largely now are informing where I am now. And amazingly, this work about working on lead poisoning prevention significantly overlaps with asthma, that when we talk about doing prevention for lead poisoning, we also can talk about how we can prevent asthma and further asthma attacks. So what this slide shows us, so what's also fascinating is that you guys have heard from experts in this space about all these things that are in our air and what can we do about it. And this slide is about that. Somebody else in the comments or the questions had asked, what can we do about air quality? Maybe our legislators are not paying attention, or the organizations that are supposed to pay attention continue to further deregulate. Well, I'm here to tell you that the cavalry is not coming, that in fact, we are the cavalry. We are the ones who can do something about the home environment. We are the ones who can help protect families and kiddos from lead poisoning and developing asthma or further exacerbating asthma attacks. So in this slide, this is about the very practical, low-cost things that we can do to engage in prevention. To the lower left-hand side there, you'll see it's a slide of nutrition. It seems, this is like a really simple thing, but the truth of the matter is that a full belly with nutritional food can expel lead much more quickly and efficiently than a belly that's full of McDonald's or Doritos, plain and simple. The second one, kindly remove your shoes upon entering. This is information that we give to every mom and dad about removing your shoes, because when you walk from the car to your home, you're bringing particulates into the home. You're bringing particulates from your workplace. And so removing shoes has been shown to reduce the amount of particulates that are inside of the home. The third one is about vacuuming. And I know all of us are like, oh my God, more housework and so forth. But this is a really, really important element in terms of cleaning up the particulates in our homes. And yes, there is a higher level of vacuuming that includes using a HEPA filter. But for many of the families that I interact with, obtaining HEPA filters is very expensive, but vacuuming is still a very important solution to cleaning up the particulates in our home. The next one has a little house on it, and that is about getting your house tested. And so this is a large part of what our team has been focusing on, is helping families to identify hotspots in their home for lead in particular. And what we've been able to do is identify, we've developed a kit that helps moms and dads find those hotspots in the soil, in the dust, in the paint, and in the water. It's a kit that takes about 15 minutes to complete. They collect 13 samples. We then do the testing here at Notre Dame and send them a report to let them know what that looks like in their home. If your child has already tested positive for lead or had an elevated level of lead, you can also, for some health departments who have that capability, you can request your health department to come out and to do a lead risk assessment. Probably this next one, this fifth one, the don't dry dust, is probably one of the most important things to communicate to moms and dads. Dry dusting, as already our panel just before was talking about, is that when you are dry dusting, you are scattering those particulates around the home. And that initially it looks like, oh, I've wiped off this windowsill, but what we've essentially done is we've moved it to another location. And unfortunately, it often is moving to the location that's lowest, and is in a previous slide you saw, who's on the floor, who's crawling around, who's ingesting those particulates on the ground. It's the littlest of us, the 1 and the 2-year-olds who are playing on the ground. So dry dusting is absolutely the worst. And so you might be asking, well, what should I do instead? It's damp dusting, and it's so simple. It's vinegar and water and a old cotton t-shirt once a week, making sure all the horizontal surfaces are clean. And then finally, it's about washing hands, making sure that we're washing our hands before our snacks and meal times and so forth. And so I think in some degree, everybody has heard about these kinds of solutions in one way or another, right? These are really practical, solvable things. But the thing is that we're not doing them. When we talk to moms and dads, they're surprised at how simple these solutions are. They're sort of waiting for somebody to come in and fix something. Take all the windows out, put the new windows in. Take all the lead out, put new paint in. And in fact, these kinds of things can significantly reduce people's exposure to lead and other fine particulates, particularly those that cause asthma attacks. Go ahead, Joe, and advance. So when Joe and I were talking about this presentation, we're like, where do we need to be focusing these efforts? Because we're not going to have time to do a mass campaign, nor do we have the monies to be able to do a mass campaign. So where should we be having these conversations? And we need to go where the kiddos are, and that's the daycares and the schools. And it is about creating awareness. Moms and dads simply don't know this information about indoor air quality and what's happening, and that indoor air quality can lead to lead poisoning. It can lead to the development of asthma. People don't know that indoor air is sometimes 5 times more polluted than outdoor air, as described by the panelists earlier. People don't know that asthma is one of the primary reasons why kiddos miss school. They fall behind. People don't know that lead poisoning lowers reading levels. People don't know this. And that lead poisoning can make asthma worse, that there's actually this connection between these two things. We need to be encouraging moms and dads to take their children to their well child appointments, because we do have laws around this in the state of Indiana that children at 1 and 2 years old are supposed to be tested for lead, but that we don't do a particularly good job of that here in Indiana. And so we need to keep talking to our parents. So to kind of and I know that we have people from across the nation, but to think we're, thinking about here in Indiana, it is 75% of homes in Indiana were built before 1978. And 1978 is when the feds finally said no more lead in paint. So we have an enormous amount of homes that are at risk for lead poisoning, putting hundreds of thousands of kiddos at risk for lead poisoning. And then we have another 100,000 children who have been diagnosed with asthma in our state. So this is the magnitude of this problem. Kiddos missing school, falling behind, grade reading levels, dropping out of school, and so forth. To me, there's no greater work than doing this work. And I will say this one last thing, Joe, and then hand it off to you. The work that we are currently doing at our local WIC store, the WIC clinic rather. We are working with moms and dads to get their homes tested because at WIC, they're seeing vulnerable families with young children. And I had a mom who said to me, I'm so grateful to my WIC clinic that they allow you to be here so that I could learn about lead poisoning and asthma, because otherwise I would have never known. And so for me right now, the emphasis on what difference can I make? How can I impact this problem here in my local community? And what I would say to all of you is that we all have this opportunity to be able to impact our community. I'll turn it over to Joe.
Thanks. Thank you, Heidi. So in terms of how we can impact our community and really thinking of resources that are available to you, Heidi did a really fantastic job of highlighting the lead screening kit that they have available in their partnership with the WIC Clinic. Other resources that are available, and I'm really glad that Gabe talked about the air quality index, because this lines up perfectly with this slide in particular, is EPA hosts something that's known as the Air Quality Flag Program. And essentially, the FLAG program is a way to inform schools and daycares about the air quality index and then make it accessible to parents and caregivers. And so essentially what the program looks like is each day the school or child care center will raise the flag according to what the AQI is for the day, and then they can plan their activities accordingly so they can make sure that they're not putting a child unnecessarily at risk for poor outdoor air quality. However, I think this is a great resource for talking about indoor air quality as well, because what's the first thing that people think about when they think about air quality? They're usually thinking about the outdoor environment. So Ike has trainings and kits available for schools or childcare centers or even individuals that are interested in learning more about this resource. The reason why there's a chameleon on the slide too is there's an educational resource called Why is Cocoa Orange? And essentially it's a children's book following a chameleon going about his day-to-day activities in his school, and the other chameleon kids are noticing that he's turning different colors. And so they're wondering what's going on with the different colors and why is he changing color. And so this makes it accessible for talking to kids and families about air quality, because oftentimes when we have these conversations, it can be a little bit scary and daunting at first. And it sends people into maybe a little bit of a sense of panic of not knowing what to do first. So this way we can talk about the conversation, talk about the issue, and have conversations with parents and caregivers so that they can understand what's going on, but then they can also take the next steps accordingly. So this is a great resource. Happy to partner with anyone who's interested, and we'll be sharing contact information at the end here. Another thing that I wanted to highlight is we have a program called Smart Schools Don't Idle. And the purpose of this program is if you happen to be a parent or caregiver or anyone that does regular pickup, you might notice that there's usually a long line of pickup and everyone has their cars just going and idling. This is especially going to be an issue in the winter time. And what happens is these emissions from the cars are staying low to the ground, and kids are inhaling these emissions as they're being picked up from school. So what we're encouraging more schools to think through is how can they encourage those people picking up the children to turn off their cars while they're waiting for the child pickup, or at least time it a little better so they don't have their car running for a significant period of time, thus impacting a child's health. And that's another tangible resource that we have available to schools and daycares. We actually have sandwich signs and different other types of signs that say no idling or kids breathe freely here, just different messaging around that. And it's available to people that are interested in maybe thinking what that policy would look like, how can we communicate this to parents, and then how do we get this going so that we can at least reduce the amount of cars that are idling in place during that school pickup time. Another thing I want to highlight from the Ike side of things is our green cleaning. And so you heard a lot about different chemicals that happen in cleaning products, but what are the healthy alternatives that you can use? And so there's a few ways to think about this. One is there's a green cleaning shopping list. And that's effective if you want to do like a DIY cleaning product. We have cleaning videos through our social media that walk people through what that would look like. But I also recognize that sometimes that trial and error can be a little bit challenging. So a personal story from me is I was trying to come up with a DIY dish cleaner. And what I ended up having was these very salty, gray looking dishes afterwards. And so that wasn't working for me on the DIY side, but I did rely on these 3 labels here to look for an alternative. So just remember when you're making these behavior changes, sometimes there's going to be a little bit of trial and error, but please stick with it. You're going to find a system that works. You just, maybe it's not always the DIY, maybe it's looking for the green and safe label, but oftentimes DIY works for me. So if I have like a stained up kitchen pot, soaking it in baking soda, just letting it wait for a while and then scrubbing it down, that can be one of the most effective and safe cleaning mechanisms out there. And then finally, this was brought up a little bit in the previous slides, but I didn't want to bring up the DIY air cleaner and give that as a list for folks. It's been proven effective for improving indoor air quality, and definitely follow those recommendations that Brandon, Nusrat, and Philip had put out. But I wanted to provide this list for folks so they understand what they need in order to make the air cleaner. This is one version of it, but there's multiple versions. So one of the other versions is the essential full box. Obviously, the more filters you're using, the higher the cost is going to go up. But for the most simplified version, essentially all you need is a box fan, a 20 by 20 by 1 MERV 13 air filter, and then some clamps, duct tape, or a bungee cord to secure it, and then a cardboard box. I recently purchased the supplies for this, so I can tell you from the local hardware store that around this is going to cost $50 to $60. However, if you happen to already have a fan in place or you have a filter, then you have some of those products already possibly lying around the house. My one tip for you guys, though, if you do try and do this at home, is I like the clamps or the bungee cord more than the duct tape, because eventually, as they mentioned, you are going to have to change those filters out. And so if it's duct taped in place, then it might be a little bit more challenging to remove that. And then the other thing is, when you're looking at the box fan, do ensure that it has some sort of safety rating, such as a UL listing on the bottom, or ETL. You can find those on the outside of the box when you're shopping. And this just shows that they've met some rigorous safety measures before you're attaching the filter to the fan. And then finally, I do just want to point out that I have a little iceberg imagery here, in that Heidi and I have talked about some things, but this is just the tip of the iceberg in terms of all the resources and information that's available. We have, for example, a lead abatement grant. That's a huge project for IKE and HEC, and I'm sure that the other folks have additional information that they can share. So what we've been able to squeeze into this hour is not even like, there's just a plethora of resources that are available and things that can help you be able to address indoor air quality in your home or in your school. So I'm going to stop sharing there, and I'll leave it open for any questions for the final few minutes.
Thank you so much, Joe. It was really helpful, and thank you to all of our panelists. I'm looking to see if there's any other questions that might be appropriate here in our last couple of minutes. One question: I live right above my apartment complex's laundry room, which has 2 washers and 2 dryers. Is it a bad idea to have my windows or doors open when someone is running laundry right below? I guess this also relates to fabric softener. Nusrat?
Yeah, this is a very good comment. So these days, if you notice, fragrances have been pumped into almost every single product. It is a good idea to avoid fragrances in your products, including laundry detergents and softeners and dryer sheets. So I would recommend to Lark that please have your windows closed and possibly see if you can purchase any carbon-based filtration units that can capture VOCs, because if people are indeed using highly fragranced products in their dryer and their washers, then is likely to receive those volatile emissions via windows if they are open, and also via infiltration, right? So when the houses are old construction, they are already leaky, so the air from outside can come in anyway. So it is a good idea to consider purchasing carbon-based filtration technologies that can care for volatile organic compounds and possibly filter them.
Thank you very much, Nusrat. Well, thank you very much to all of our presenters. This is really informative and very useful. We covered a lot of ground in a short period of time, which is exciting. As a reminder, we will be sending out the link for this presentation when we are able to process it and get it up on YouTube. And just as a notification, we have 2 webinars next week from ISF, and that is one on the Weather and Climate New Year. If you go to our website, there's a link for that, as well as another one on coal ash. So thank you very much to all of you and have a great day.